why are we listening to this now? While we were there was very few safety incidents. One was a gentleman was power washing his truck, and the wand kicked back really hard when he pulled the trigger. And it turned out that there was some calibration issues with the pump, and so it was kicking back really hard. And in this case, he had all his PPE on, his eyeglasses, safety or hard hat, and the wand hit the glasses, broke them, and then he got it cut. One of the pieces of data they brought in was the two-way radio recording before, during, to hear the ERT response. What if somebody called like 3 weeks ago and said this is kicking back really hard, like into dispatch over the radio, and we could have caught it then?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ore-atory. I'm Lindsey Schultz, and I have Jack Kellner with me today, and he is part of two different groups, Canary Waves and Regeneration. So welcome, Jack.
Lindsey, very excited.
I am always excited for these, and I'm extra excited today because I feel like you have been rapidly posting all kinds of interesting things that we're going to have to talk about, and I finally get to meet you in person.
No, it's one of those, I think, I get a lot of DMs about it, like, mining seems a little uptight, like, thanks for bringing a little humor, and it strikes me because it's like, really? Like, when you go into operations, like, people are laughing and joking and all the time and just high-fiving, so, like, why can't we bring that to the professional LinkedIn site or the more corporate mining people? Like, it kind of needs that.
I couldn't agree more, and I have spent a lot of this week going through a list that I have as we approach PDAC for marketing purposes, right? And so I'm like going through all of these websites of clients that I want to be clients and looking at their websites. And every time I get on there, and it's like there's a formula. And so it's like, commodity, whatever, like purpose, proven results, this, that, the other. And I'm like, not one of these company corporate websites is saying like, we're creating the future of the world, and like this is the first part of the supply chain, or like solving big problems. It's like drilling a hole in this area with proven resources, invest in us. And I'm like, ugh. So there's me throwing shade with the mining industry again. So I think we could humanize the message a bit, and I love that you're doing that both through humor and education and all kinds of interesting things. But I guess to kind of like lead us off, I ask people all the time, like, origin story. So how'd you get into mining? Why are you staying? What's up?
So I came into mining through geology, like a lot of folks, but I came into geology very differently, right? So I went to a small Catholic liberal arts school in Minnesota, University of St. Thomas. Played football D3, first school to go to D3 to D1, go Tommies.
Wow.
It was a very cool story. That's another episode. But while there, they have a really awesome geology program at the University of St. Thomas, kind of a diamond in the rough, no pun intended. Great professors from MIT, Arizona State, doing some awesome research, even at maybe a non-research institution.
Yeah.
But I originally wanted to go for biology. St. Thomas has a really good study abroad program. And you could go to Costa Rica over January term, and you could skip Minnesota January and go down to Costa Rica. Like, who wouldn't want to do that, right? So applied for that, couldn't get in. Second best opportunity was Vegas, geology of the Southwest US. Okay, that sounds kind of cool. And like, they do it for freshmen. That's their field camp, and absolutely hooked me. And I think it's a great idea actually for university programs to like do their field camp earlier, because you're going to hook majors in really early with the camping, hiking, and the mapping, and all of the great stuff that geology programs bring. But that was like my intro to geology. Started out actually in environmental consulting when I left school, and the mining market wasn't really like kind of advertised to me while I was at school. So environmental consulting, limited site investigations, tons of drilling. And then I got into mining actually through environmental compliance. So I was working with a big construction aggregates provider, big quarry in the Minneapolis area. They were providing crushed limestone and aggregate products for building. And then they also had a couple of frac sand mines up in, this was the days of the Northern Whites up in northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. And so I was doing environmental compliance for them and started getting back into geology and exploring for in-basin frac sand. So we had some, oil and gas clients that kind of on a consult to operate model. We wanted to say, hey, look, let's try to find some more sand for you guys, and then we can come in and do some contract mining for you. It was a cool little business model. So started doing some
Yeah.
more exploration in basin, right? Eagleford, the Bakken, Thunder Basin, like just getting out and seeing, hey, can we find frac sand that's closer to the wellhead, and we're willing to sacrifice quality for a closer haul. So it's really interesting stuff at that time, and it was really moving fast. The frac sand industry back then still is. But while I was doing that, got a call from the newly formed Nevada Gold Mines, Dumont and Barrick out in Nevada. So went out to Elko, did the deal that many of us had done, and worked at Long Canyon, one of my favorite operations ever, Cortez, Carlin, and moved from environmental to environmental project management, heat bleach facility expansions, some dewatering wells, installations, and then got into larger, more operational projects like material transport studies, what else, underground paste plant, stuff like that. And then finally got back over to Rio Tinto, and that's how I've gone into regeneration. And Canary Waves is a different story, but I guess we'll get to that.
We will. Yeah. Well, I love the origin story because it's always sort of like a happy accident that people wind up in mining, especially if they've not come from like a mining family or area. And even sometimes when they've come from Elko, they're like, oh, I didn't know that I would be in mining. I didn't actually think much about it, including one of my team members here. She's from Elko and no one in her family was in mining. And now here we are. And so Samantha, it sort of is a happy accident too. So I always love an origin story. But I think also what I find really interesting about your background is that you have both the geology and the mining engineering side. And, that's, I think, sometimes unusual.
Yeah, it's kind of sad for me because I went and did my mining engineering degree for South Dakota School of Mines kind of while I was working in Elko, and I was living out in Elko for my Monday through Thursday, my 4 days, my 4 10s, and then I'd actually head back to Salt Lake because my wife, who's also a geologist, we met in field camp, very, very common story, geologist for the Utah Geological Survey. So she can't live in the, I'm doing this back in the 2020 COVID times. I'm doing this commute, over the weekend, and I'm sitting after shift, just nothing to do. So let's learn about mining engineering. And it's really fantastic because I found a even stronger passion, not just for the industry, but for mining engineering and like mine optimization as like a discipline, more so than my passion for geology. So like oftentimes I'm like, oh yeah, geology.
You've turned into one of those. Oh,
Freaking horrible, actually.
Well, I had to ask about it because I feel like, we often have the chicken and the egg story all the time with geos and mine engineers. So, another thing that I have always loved about you, I guess generally, is that you have a very healthy sense of like making yourself very real and human. And so you call yourself a recovering corporate mining professional. And as I was researching for our episode and perused both Canary Waves and Regeneration, and at the beginning of our episode, conversely sort of criticized all of these other mining companies for doing a poor job about talking about their company, you've done the exact opposite. And so like I went through Canary Waves and Regeneration, and like a layman can go through and read what you're doing and understand it. And so kudos to you, but recovering corporate mining professional might be exactly what we need. And so that's why you've had a little bit. What
I should probably stop saying that.
it turned out.
And like I should say like very clearly, like my role at Regeneration is still like I'm seconded from Rio. So I work for Rio, and this is like God's honest truth, like the Rios and the BHPs of the world, the Newmonts of the world, the big majors, they are doing their part. They are like trying to develop founders through Founders Factory and Think and Act Differently. And they're doing the things. And so I commend them for that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't, poke fun at ourselves a little bit. I think it's important, add a little bit of humility.
Yeah.
Kind of keeps us grounded, because otherwise you start to get really robotic. And that's some of the stuff I push back on. Is like, we don't need to just like be a bank that's looking for numbers and cents. Like there are people going out into your mines every day that are putting their safety on the line. Like, let's make it a little human, like poke a little fun at ourselves, poke a little fun at them. Like that's what we're all here for. It's a job, right? That's what work is about, is fulfillment for humans. So let's make it a bit more human. And that's, I think, kind of rails against the mining engineering and the mine optimization and just like the metrics and the KPIs. Like, so let's just pump the brakes a little bit, bring back the human, and make it fun if we can, because that's, what else are we doing if we're having a little fun?
There's the founder of Tom's Shoes. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. I can't remember the guy's name, but he has sort of a quote that he goes back to all the time, which basically says, like, if we're not having fun in all of the things that we're doing, whether it's work, whether it's, figuring out how to work hard, like all of this should be sort of, meshed together. And so maybe there's no balance. There's just a blur, and we're all figuring out how to embrace that. And I think what you're saying kind of is the same idea, that, there's two sides of the coin, right? We're paying attention to production and safety and numbers and all of that, but like, we're humans every single day. And so figuring out how to do that well is really important. But you started segueing really nicely into some of the work that you're doing at Canary Waves. So let's talk a little bit about Canary Waves, which I think is really, really cool and kind of happened on accident, it sounds like.
A little bit. Yeah, I guess it was an accident or an incident. I mentioned Long Canyon, Nevada Gold Mines. It was a great operation. I think it's in care and maintenance now. At the time, it was like super low ASIC, heap leach operation, carbon column, and we shipped the loaded carbon out. It was great. Like, we say, no offense to the Cortez folks, but we saved their ass a couple of times on the Cortez. Right. It was great. And it was one of those, I talk about it a lot, like in comments on LinkedIn, or I'll go back and DM some of the folks that worked there at the time. And it was kind of a lightning in the bottle project. And I think a lot of mining professionals have this in their career, where like we had the mine manager, the surveyor, the environmental guy, a front end loader operator. It's, 5:45 having coffee in the surveyor's office. It was like that type of operation. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And there are people that think back on that and they're like, God, I miss that so much. It's like, that is like really the exception, not the rule. Like, the experience. So it was really a blessing to learn, go from like aggregates right into that type of operation and like learn.
Yeah.
Just a step up. Hey, heap leach gold mining. Hey, here's all these really cool people.
Yeah.
But while we were there was very few safety incidents. One was a gentleman was power washing his truck, and the wand like kicked back really hard when he pulled the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that there was some calibration issues with the pump, and so it was kicking back really hard. And in this case, he had all his PPE on, his eyeglasses, safety or hard hat, and the wand hit the glasses, broke them, and then he got it cut. And so I got called into the incident investigation, and for anybody that's been on them, they bring in all kinds of data, right? They got training records, they got calibration records, they got, what do they got? Like safety logs, they got all kinds of data. They got video camera if they have it. And one of the pieces of data they brought in was the two-way radio recording before, during, to hear the ERT response, and then after the incidents, kind of see how everything settles out. And we went through the incident, like, it kind of struck me at the time, like, why are we listening to this now? Like, what if somebody called like 3 weeks ago and said, this is kicking back really hard, like into dispatch over the radio, and we could have caught it then? And that was kind of the seed for Canary Waves. It was back in like 2021. And I started just kind of like toying with the idea and talking with people about it, seeing if it could be a product market fit, and found a co-founder. He's down in New Zealand, really great software engineer, had built some tools for the industry before, but the time zone thing didn't work out. I had to like rebuild the prototype from scratch. And then my co-founder came in, Julia, who has done some other mining and heavy industry and aggregates software tools, and has exited a couple times. She's like, hey, I really like what you're doing. Like, we can get this going. And so we kind of turned it from garage band idea into like a real, big boy product, and launched in October. And we see some really great traction, and people are really excited about it. And it's really fulfilling. But I think I'm waiting until like it potentially saves someone's life. Like, that'll be all I need for it, because I think we can.
Yeah.
And it is there. It's just going unleveraged at most mine sites. So why not use it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like you said, I think we have so much data at this point, and the ability to utilize it, analyze it, communicate, and do better is such a huge opportunity. And you guys are working on it, which is super cool. I'm gonna pop up. I'm always very excited when I can figure out how to use my technology here in the background. And so I have linked Canary Waves, your website,
Oh,
so
cool.
people
Right
who might be
on.
curious can check it out. Right? I'm like, hey, I did this in advance. I was prepared, and I clicked the button. So voila. So those of you who are not watching and actually listening, all of this stuff will be linked at the end. But, I think, the idea of Canary Waves and also your website, as I'm like toggling between our screen and like looking at it, it is very Jack. And so like some of your cartoons, the graphics, all of this stuff sort of hit on all of that. And like I said, it's got a very human voice to it, which as part of this kind of safety platform, really I think is important. But, I guess I always talk to people about
Human voice, Lindsey.
yeah. And but like yeah, people try to over corporate it, and I try to work really hard with our brand to not do that. And so now we're switching into entrepreneurial mode. But, was it innate to you to sort of like speak in this voice and say like, hey, this, like, let's talk like humans, let's not make this overly stuffy or corporate? Like, how did that originate? And like when you put your entrepreneur hat on, like,
It wasn't that explicit or obvious. It's a really good question because now
yeah,
I'm realizing like it's like the whole tech is based on the human voice, so let's like make it about human voice. But I don't think that was the intention.
yep,
I think like like my initial like early days version of Carry Waves was like Sentinel Mining Communications. It was overly corporate, like kind of fit the same old
yeah,
mining, template that you described before.
yeah,
When Julia came in, she was like, we can do better. Like this can be more fun. Like we don't have to be so serious. Like we can make it futuristic and techy. And like, I'm like, yes, but we also have to remember we're dealing with the mining industry and like they are laggards and there are guys and gals on site who are like, I don't want to change my ways. Totally fair. And
yep,
so we have to like be sensitive to that while also kind of like bringing in that fun futuristic tech approach.
yep,
And I think we nailed it. Like the color palette, like we get a ton of comments on it. And at first I was like, I don't know. But like that, it's like some of our most like commented on material is like our website, our color palette, our branding. People really like it. So I'm
I really like it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really well done. And like I said, we get to have lots of like building teams, running companies, conversations in the backside of like technical mining talk. And so
Yeah.
part of what always gets me really excited. But, I like the idea that there is a balance point and that you thought about it. And I also appreciate that you had that moment where you were being like, you know, wearing your corporate mining hat and saying like, but in mining, we have to talk this way, because I have that conversation with myself all of the time. I'm like, this contract sounds awfully contracty.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but it needs to. And so sometimes figuring out the right balance of all this stuff is important. But like, I love the website, and I think it's so well done. And you've got like metrics and all these things. And so it just speaks to it answers all the questions really quickly, how it works, why as the team, like, the way you're talking about it. So I think it's really cool. So thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. We're excited about it. And we've gotten some proof of concepts off the ground. So we're working with
Good.
like one of the largest mining companies in the world, gold mining companies in the world. Very excited to kind of bring the solution to their operations. We're kind of like network agnostic, right? So if you have a network that's operating in the underground or at surface, like the technology slices in kind of after the fact, like can lay on top of the network. And one of the things I was commenting today on a post, like one of the things we really love about it is that we got a lot of feedback during product market fit, like from operations and control room specialists, like, I don't need another dashboard. I don't want another system.
Yeah.
And like, totally fair, man. I get it. We've put like very little effort into the UI because like we understand that, and the UI can be changed kind of at the drop of a hat. And so
Yep.
we really focused on making sure that integration and then sort of the contextualization of the data that you're already gathering is core to the product. So like, for example, you've got your fleet management system and your SAP work order management system that are already available on site. They're already collecting data. They're delivering KPIs to decision makers and management. a lot of times, if there's a dip in production in the middle of the night, there's no context as to why, but usually that's being talked about over the radio by the operators. This happened, that happened, we're responding to it. This is why cycle times dropped, whatever the case is. And Canary Waves is able to capture that, create context around your other KPI data, and provide like the why. Right.
Yeah. That's really cool.
And longer term, if you continue to see the same whys, you can start to act on them and manage them and improve your site so that those whys start to decrease.
Yeah. Well, recognizing those trends and catching them early because it's delivered as part of the rest of the unit of detail that they're looking for is huge, right? Because otherwise it just kind of like somebody can notice it, but then no one else brings it up, just like the safety incident that created it. And so having that kind of pop in and say, like, this has happened 3 times, like maybe this is worth a conversation or figuring it out.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And then like eventually getting to predictive, right? To say, hey, when is this happening? Why, like if it happened 14 times over the course of a production year, when exactly did that occur? And what other factors, from the fleet management or from the SAP work order or from Scintillate or Isometrics or whatever your environmental system is, what are the triggers that are kind of causing that? We can start to see that. So that's where kind of the LLM and the AI comes in, is to do that deep analytic work.
Well, AI, I think, is hitting all kinds of hot buttons at the moment. But I think that when we're using it in that context, when it's like highly trainable and it recognizes these things, like it's working really, really well. Like the post that you did this morning, which is not going to be this morning by the time this airs, AI fails us, but like there are other times I think where it really, really captures the essence of what we're trying to do and saves us lots of time and potential mistakes. And so layering that in, I think is really, really a cool concept as well. And something that I think we're seeing more often. And when it's done well, it's awesome.
Yeah. Hyper specific use case is kind of the way we like to think about it. Like we're not here to like just wrap up a product and call it AI. Like we're here to like actually deliver like a problem solving tool. And if AI can assist in that, great. Like that, all the best.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we're seeing lots of, as you said, hyper specific use cases across the board in like medical and mining and all kinds of ways, because it identifies the trend and the issue far better than like our human side does. And so because we're a pattern. And so I think it's really a fascinating thing to take into consideration. On the other side, you have this other really cool company, which is Regeneration. So seconded from Rio Tinto. And so you've got Regeneration. Let's talk about that. And that's a tailings reprocessing scenario or business unit ultimately. So you started work on that with Rio Tinto and then spun that out, or what is Regeneration and how did
you go origin story on Regenerations?
Yes, give it to me.
Regeneration is kind of the brainchild of Rio Tinto Closure. Harvey was a great closure leader over in Rio Tinto for a lot of years. And then Steve Desposito is the CEO of Regeneration. He's also the founding CEO of Resolve, which is an NGO based in Washington, D.C. that has worked on environmental and societal mediation between heavy industry and communities and stuff like this, and done a ton of great work. So we bring in an NGO, and then you bring in Rio Tinto to kind of bring to life maybe a larger scale or more focused approach on tailings reprocessing. I think as we're getting into tailings reprocessing, we're talking about it and like this pretty hot button issue, quite frankly, especially among like mineral processing folks.
Huge.
Yeah, I don't want to like poke the bear, but we can. But like we're not here to like bring a specific technology forward to process tailings, which I think is the way the industry was trying to go. They were trying to like fit this square tailings pile into the round hole of this technology and kept stumbling on it. And then we were trying to scale these technologies too quickly. And so I think Regeneration, between Steve and Peter and like their vision as a coordinated effort towards tailings reprocessing, but then the added bonus and benefit and really the primary goal of restoration is a really nice and unique way to package up tailings reprocessing and kind of flip the business model a little bit. And I think they've done a really, really, really nice job of communicating that. And my role, Rio Tinto being, a founding member and a shareholder, seconded me over to help Regeneration kind of build out those capital project governance capacities and executing some of their early projects and their early agreements with some of their upper aid partners.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, I think it's really, really cool. And looking at the website, one of the things that really struck me, and you just said it basically, was when you talk about the process, the first thing you talk about is identifying the sites and engaging communities. And then it kind of unfolds from there. And that is unlike any other reprocessing tailings company that I've seen to date. And so, quite notable from my perception. And so, really, really interesting that, and I think sometimes it does take wearing different hats and having different contributors. And I think you and I talked about this, on our intro call to one another a month or two ago, where having new different people into the industry is really critical. And so having this NGO lens into how to do this for the mining industry, how much influence did they have on like where to start and how to push this all forward, or was that something else?
I guess the stakeholder first planning is kind of how you described it, and we think of it in the same way. There's like an entire team of Regeneration, and a lot of them have that background in NGO and conflict mediation and all of this. The project starts there, and we go through like a visioning process with the stakeholders, be they local community members, First Nations or tribal communities, and understand like what would be the ideal scenario in a world where we could actually pull this off. What would it look like? And what species would be here? Like what, even like there are certain projects we're looking at now, like there's a medicinal flower that was used locally for many, many years. Like is a sign of the project's success that flower has returned to the area, right? So like those are the types of things
that's cool
we're kind of looking at, and stepping that process back, costing it out, creating design criteria, kind of the same way we do in the mining industry, but starting with that very human, very community-focused approach. So it's this cool blend. It's not without its growing pains, right? It's kind of like the Brady Bunch, smash people together. And we have, differences of like the way we go about things, but the mission is always the same, and the vector is like pointing in the direction.
Well, I think it's really interesting, and perhaps it could like create sort of a ripple effect, right? Maybe I'm being too idealistic, but if you're going in and saying like, let's look at the community, talk to the people, start with a vision, like why not do this from a mining company perspective? This doesn't just have to be reprocessing, right? Like this could happen in a lot of different instances where people truly spend some time and do that up front. And sometimes I think it's a bit of an aftersight.
It's a really good question and good point. I guess I'll start by saying like people are doing this, right? Like there are community keys and societal, and public relations departments in mining companies that are working on fostering that social license to operate and those good communication practices and that early engagement. I think this is a rather technical answer to this, but I think part of the reason it falls apart in like a greenfields or a brownfields mining operation, a traditional mining operation, is that a lot of times the goal is to continue to expand the resource, like continue to find new intercepts, continue to expand that project. And I think that comes across as disingenuous to the communities when the early days, 10 years ago, it was, this is the project, this is the mine life, blah, blah, blah. And I think in tailings reprocessing, it's a little easier for us to say like, this is the project, this is the timeline, this is the life of mine, and really meet the resource is finite. It's right there, right? Like we don't have like potentially underground intercepts that are going for, another several hundred meters or whatever it is. It's just right here. It's just this square that we take out. And so I think there's a little bit of that going on.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, right? Because I think sometimes, and again, I am a non-technical person in the mining industry that just happens to get to deal with lots of different mine sites and people. And so having these conversations helps me understand what's going on, but also create the lens for others to understand something new, like imply new, different practices, to think a little bit differently. And that's sort of what we want to do. But it doesn't mean that like my overly idealistic idea that like, hey, everybody should just go in and like make friends with their neighbors and they're all going to support it, right? I feel like that that's not always realistic. And I
Yeah,
think,
and I think a big
we
part too is
we
like
oversimplify at
regeneration.
times.
Regeneration is set up as a public benefit corporation, and so it's like within the bylaws
Mhm.
of the company that like we're going to work towards that restoration outcome and supporting the community in the post mining life cycle. And so
Yeah.
I think that gives a lot of communities a lot of comfort, and it is like part of the DNA and how we're moving forward. And it's not to say that
Mhm.
like larger mining companies aren't, interested in that or trying to do that. It's just that it's not like built into their DNA in the same way.
Right. Right. But I mean, it is an interesting thing. And perhaps this will also create others to be thinking about that because I sometimes think like, you know, Rio's big enough that they have to think about it and that they've got a horizon and a timeline where they've got to see through closure or they have assets that are, doing that. But a lot of other groups are like, man, we just need to get to the next tranche of making money and figuring out how to make this work. That like thinking about closure, thinking about how to deal with this stuff at the end, they're probably not even going to own the asset at that point. And so,
That's a
really,
huge part of it, right? Is the way
yeah,
the industry is set up for them to exit or another company to come in and purchase that asset or liability
yep.
kind of creates this off-ramp
Hmm.
where people don't have to consider this. They don't have to build it into their life of
Yep.
mine financial models. Like that, it's really an interesting way to think about kind of the business model flipping. And that's kind of like my approach to my talk at SME next month is going to be like the innovation for tailings reprocessing doesn't always have to be technological, right? So like obviously, yes,
Yeah.
like it's already been, hit with cyanide, for example. You got to go and leach it in a different way, or you got to find a way to get the gold out if it's locked in arsenopyrite. Fine. That's technical, and I can respect that. But there's also like business model innovations, downstream and offtake
Hmm.
agreements. That's something that Regeneration is really built on. One of our founding members is Apple, and they want to
Yeah.
tell that cool story, right? And sell that to their
Yeah.
customers as part of their supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Value creation through liability reduction. That's a business model innovation. Can we take the liability that does exist that we've already addressed and reduce that and work with regulators and see if there's an opportunity to kind of lower that for whoever the owning party is, right?
Yep.
Operational, like keep it small, keep it modular. You can capitalize the equipment, take it to the next one. So I talk through this all in my SME paper next month, and we can talk more about it then. But and for everything.
Awesome. Please do. And, are you going to go back and get like a PhD in process engineering now?
No, absolutely not.
I'm going to show regeneration because look, again, I'm
Oh, there
prepared.
it
And
is.
so we,
Cool bit.
wow. So yeah, regeneration's up here. So you guys can go check it out and sort of understand what regeneration is all about and look at the really cool website. I also have to comment on one of the parts that I said I might
On
not
that.
to. They've done a great job on it. I'm
DC area that are really good at messaging and stuff like that. So
It's a beautiful site, but my favorite part is solution. Don't let a perfectly good mind waste go to waste. Like
yeah,
perfect little punchline.
it's awesome. It's awesome.
Well, let's sort of change gears a little bit because there's like we're having a very multifaceted conversation. You also do all kinds of really cool stuff online, and I love all the memes. I like the articles. I like that you lighten things up. Style is super fun. There's all kinds of sort of like mining influencers, but I would credit you as one of my favorite mining influencers out there at this point.
Flatter. There's so many good ones. That's nice company.
There are, but like it's a great group of people to watch, and I'm sure there are lots that I don't know about. So if you guys want to leave me all of your favorites, I will like go geek out on it. But Jack,
Started calling us.
yeah, I love it. And so, but yesterday you posted an article really talking about like sort of the gamification opportunity that we have within mining and like creating something really cool. And so I'm going to show the article. So this is far too long for you guys to take in, but here's the article that Jack wrote that posted yesterday, I guess February 3rd or something like that on LinkedIn. Take a peek at it, but let's talk about it because I think it's a really, really interesting concept. So you're essentially saying that if we gamified mining, that we might have a better talent pool to draw from because they know about it earlier. So like I'm going to start there and then you go into the rest of it because there's a whole lot to it.
And this, like, by no means is this like my soapbox or my area of expertise. Like I go to the post because I tagged like a bunch of people that are working on this. like in more detail, that have started companies to like really address this problem. But I'm a gamer. Like I grew up like building my own computers, still have them. And like, that's kind of like, if I need to take an hour and decompress for my 2-year-old, like, but
Fair.
the primary idea, and I kind of got inspired by another video game that was super focused on a different industry, was like farming simulator, right? Like there's Giant Software, who's tagging the post and like in the article extensively, like basically it was like an independent studio that just wanted to build like simulation engines. That's just their passion. And they started with a ski resort thing there, which I have to check that out, because that would be really interesting, like with the cats and everything like this. But
Yeah.
they got into farming simulator. It really hits home for like a lot of like just gamers in the general public that like this hyper realistic, like really detail oriented simulation model. And it obviously, like for folks that are on the industry side, in this case agriculture, it obviously pales in comparison to real life, right? Like let's not like make any bones about it. But like the general public, you could get 80% of like the full experience and they would be like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, this is awesome. And that's what Giant Software started to do, is they were like building these more and more realistic approaches to how modern agriculture is working. And so much so that like they started cutting deals with OEMs like John Deere and Case, and like your really high-end like agricultural equipment and implementation manufacturers, and saying like, hey, would you guys be willing to like be featured in our video game that like 25 million players see? And they were like, yeah, for sure. And they like actually upload realistic CAD designs to the video game, and they're maybe not proprietary, right? There's something that's a little bit watered down. If you're listening, and they kind of let the game and the gamers like build off of that and create like these new designs and like new approaches, and like people feel like they're a part of the industry. And it's evolved now so much so that like it actually is a part of the industry. Like that game is like how farmers will test new concepts or test new pieces of equipment. Like John Deere will put out like an early CAD design of like next year's model, right? And they can see how it will work and how it will function and where it breaks and why, and like they can really test that out. And to me, it like became abundantly clear, like we don't need to like gamify like training within a silo through Caterpillar's official like network, right? Like, and that's what's happening right now. Like everybody's doing gamification and training VR, and it's great, but like you could just like work with Giant Software, put out a cool video game, and a ton of people would play it. And then you start to build a talent pool. They're familiar with what we're talking about. Like if a mining or processing engineer that was really passionate about mining had played the game as a child and then showed up to university totally knowing what a ball mill and a rod mill and a sag mill, really, that would be a huge step up, right, in our talent pool.
Huge.
So,
I mean,
like it's kind of the concept of the article in a nutshell. And like I said, there's other people like kind of pursuing this as like their full passion. I just think it's like something worth noting and like really paying attention to.
I couldn't agree more. And like, this is my soapbox, not necessarily a video game, but like, how do we get people interested in mining and give them more information about it so that it's ever a career choice, right? Because just like you said, like you wanted to do biology and geology wound up as a default. And then like through field camp and other stuff, it became more and more viable. But like, you know, to tell a bad story several years ago, and I guess this is actually quite a few years ago, I spoke to a bunch of graduating bachelor's degree students in a geology class. And I said, like, what do you guys want to know? Like, how can I be helpful for you? And I thought it'd be stuff like how to interview, like, you know, how much should I get paid? Like, where should I be looking? Things like that, right? Because they lived in a silo at university, you know, that is very, very different than what they might see. And the first question all of these geologists asked me were, what should we expect on a daily basis? And I'm like,
great question.
We haven't covered that. And so that was a real eye-opener to me where, like, am I going to be in the field? Like, how much time? Like, you know, and I mean, the answer depends on what kind of geology they wound up going into. But like, so it's a really hard question to answer. But the fact that like they had gotten 4 years into a degree and still had no clue in some cases was a huge eye opener to me. And, you know, I've got a 6-year-old who is fairly obsessed with Minecraft at this point. And like, he'll watch shows about other people playing Minecraft
And like,
and like how to do all
I
the,
love Minecraft, but like, we gotta do better.
it's, we got to do better than Minecraft. And like, I'm like, listen, netherite is not real, babe. And it's not real. And he's like, Minecraft, I don't know. I haven't seen it on the periodic table of elements. And so like we have all these conversations, but you know, and several years ago, I guess I was at PDAC and maybe CIM or somebody released like a video game for mining that I heard about. And I made my husband and older son download it.
In that thread yesterday, like, hey, CIM put out a video game.
Yeah. It just wasn't.
This weekend, so I might be booting that up.
There you go. It was like my husband is also a bit of a gamer. And so like it just wasn't like graphically like in like doing what it needed to do for him. And like he just couldn't get into it. And he went to like a mining school and all of our friends are in mining. So like he gets it, but he just couldn't get into it. My older son, who at the time I guess was probably 13 or something like that, he was like, this isn't my jam. But there's also like a funny one where they like mine coal and they go up and down shafts. And my 6-year-old now, he liked that one for, you know, hot minute. But like, you know, a lot of these ideas are when they're not new, but like seeing them demonstrate what they're capable of in agriculture or other industries. Like, we just need to be more creative, right? And also more welcoming. And so just like you've done at Regeneration by working with NGOs and other people and welcoming them to the table with different perceptions and ideas of how to get things done, we all learn from one another. But, you know, so many people just don't even know mining exists. And so play a video game, make it really cool, make it classically interesting. Yeah, why not? There's all kinds of others.
Fun.
God forbid, right? It would be awesome. So I loved that article and I commented on it and I was like, get ready. That's what we're going to talk about today. I haven't seen that yet, but it's like, you know, I think, you know, shifting gears again, something I think that you have talked about and we've talked about in the back end is sort of like de-risking, right? And so you have been sort of challenging that language, de-risking, and what about that do you think really needs to change? Because we're using it all the time in mining. This is your soapbox and I'm ready for it.
Well, I should put out a caveat. Like, I'm not challenging the language per se. Like, I still use the term. There's nuance, right? Like,
I do every day.
Geologic de-risking of a deposit is very different than some of the de-risking that I kind of rail against from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let me explain myself, right? I'm more challenging a blind adherence to the concept as a way to like protect your corporate major or mid-major mining career, right? Like, I think a lot of people are not risking the project or protecting the business's capital. They're really just trying to find a way to de-risk like their level of accountability. It's almost an excuse, right? And so I'm kind of railing against that more or less because like without proper motivation, like this term or like a weaponization of it it stifles growth, it stifles innovation, new thinking, like kind of perpetuates that we've always done it this way mentality because they're just like shutting down ideas right away. And like the clearest example I've seen in my time at the majors is like capital project investment committees or approval boards like explicitly requesting kill criteria before we've like even gone through all that. And like that to me, like that just explains and encapsulates perfectly like why the de-risking mentality is bad, because it just like manifests itself as kill criteria. Like, how do we kill this project?
Yeah.
Well, do you want the project to go? Because now we're at a point in the industry where we don't have organic pipelines because we've killed them all in the name of de-risking, and we have kill criteria to kill them. And it's like, why not make them success criteria? Right. And what criteria? Yeah. It's just your investment criteria as a business. Like, that's really lazy.
But
we can certainly do better and create better success criteria and call them success criteria and like encourage success instead of just demanding that we kill everything in the name of de-risking. Like, that's kind of that's my soapbox. That's my 2 cents. That's me explaining myself. harping on de-risking. I'll continue to do it. Like I'll have a debate with, 30-year-old mine manager that thinks we should continue de-risking. But yeah, that's my spiel.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, and I guess, there's de-risking in a whole lot of different realms, right? Like one of the biggest risks that I identify with my clients every day is that they're not going to have enough people to make a project happen, right? And as these fast 41s start happening, there aren't enough project teams. There aren't enough, bodies that know how to do what they're asking them to do in the timeline that we're really looking at in the next several years. And so while we have this moment in mining, we also have another moment where we have to sort of reconcile that we have not set up the pipeline. We have not trained these individuals. We haven't put enough into that. And so to me, de-risking from a people side means that you're going to have to include different people in the pipeline, right? And so, but we see it in the ways that companies choose to communicate about what they do. This is the way that it's always been done. Just like I railed on at the very beginning, the first page of your corporate mining website says drilling in the Yukon for gold, proven resources. Okay, anybody that's an investor that doesn't know anything about mining, that doesn't mean anything to them. That doesn't mean any but thing to, an environmental person who wants to get into mining potentially. And then they go and see that and they're like, what? And so, there's de-risking in all different facets of what we're doing. But I think to speak to your point, I agree that we should be creating opportunities to succeed and see the vision ahead rather than just saying that doesn't fit what I'm going for.
Yeah.
And being programmed to say no versus programmed to solve the hard problem.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm railing against. De-risking is kind of turned into this boogeyman for me of more of an attitude that's
yeah,
we don't really want to change the way we're doing things. We're going to continue to say no to projects that don't make sense or aren't big enough.
Yeah.
Episode 2, we'll go into that.
Well, you're already invited back to episode 2. I need to hear the story about field camp with your wife. And now we've got to go more into de-risking. We've got all these things.
The card game. You play?
No.
Oh yeah, that's an upper Midwest ice fishing game. And yeah.
It's too cold. That's way too cold.
It's our grounding piece, but we played it on field camp in geology.
I love it.
That one.
I love it. Well, I get to hear lots of stories about, swipe left or right, or, I met my spouse in Peru or whatever the case might be. And so it's always another good origin story. But I swear I'm going to make an app for recruitment that's just like Tinder, and we're going to swipe left or right based on criteria and not what people look like, but resume, right, left. And then I'd get instant feedback because it would also be a lot of fun instead of me calling my clients and nagging and be like, what do you think about this resume?
Flip it or reverse it. Glassdoor didn't go far enough. I think we should give the candidates a bunch of companies, and they're like, nah, don't want to be a part. No.
Yeah. There you go. Well, and then if they mutually match, then it's voila, we could do both. Yeah. Okay. Well, turns out we've just changed the whole recruiting game.
Well,
thank you. Yeah. See, you just need to say these things out loud. So, we're sort of running to end of time here, but what I want to do is, remind everybody to go check out both Canary Waves and Regeneration. And at the very least, connect with Jack. Where do I have it? Boom. On LinkedIn and check out his awesome commentary and CB. What are you calling it? The mining. There you go. In a reverse side.
Do you want to go skiing? Hit me up.
Yeah. So, now we've got pressure to release before SME. So anyway, I so appreciate your being here, Jack, and having the conversation with me. Is there any parting words or takeaways that you think our audience should have after today? It's a big question. I didn't prepare you for that one.
That's a good one. Yeah, I'd say stay open-minded to going small and attacking these big, huge supply issues that our industry's in the knees every day. Don't be afraid to start small, even though it feels like, some of the industry is way out ahead of us, or we're never going to catch up on the critical minerals front, whatever the case may be. A lot of those technologies are dying in big major R&D departments because they can't scale to big major operations? Do they need to right now, right? Like, do your skills need to scale to that level right now? Well, don't be afraid to stay small. Don't be afraid to like kind of own your little niche or your little corner of the industry. That's kind of,
Yeah.
my LinkedIn is kind of a microcosm of that. Like, I don't really care who's reading it. Like, I'm just kind of just going to shout from my corner. And
Yeah.
if you like it, great. And if you don't, let's talk about it, right? Like, we can have a technical discussion. It might start as a meme, but we could get down in the nitty gritty. Don't be afraid to be your whole self, I guess, in the industry. You don't have to put up the technical mind engineer face all the time.
It's true. And I also encourage that because I think it's such a relationship based scenario in the world that we work in. And there are so few of us that you very rarely remember that this person did X, Y, and Z technical criteria or things, right? And sometimes you know them well enough to have been there for it. But when you get to know the actual people that are around, you know that they're associated. And then you build like all kinds of relationships and orbs of awesome happenstance at times that support new endeavors and other relationships and opportunities. And it's just like a really, really cool thing to be a part of. So be your whole self because it's far easier to remember that than somebody who just,
You get the work day too. Certainly.
Well, I love it. And I appreciate that. So awesome. Thank you again for being here. All of you that have visited, Jack will probably be on again. So anyway, we'll talk soon.